Thank you for tuning in to the Cannabis Currency podcast, sponsored by publiclytradedpodcasts.com. Cannabis Currency provides companies an outlet to share valuable information with a focus on CBD, hemp, and cannabis markets. From testing laboratories to full-scale hemp farming, agricultural, nutraceutical, and pharmaceutical development and production, ancillary businesses and consultants, medicinal and recreational dispensaries, oils, edibles, infused beverages, and more. Cannabis Currency brings to the forefront publicly traded companies on the cutting edge to help heighten your awareness in an ever-expanding market. Here's your host, Marcus Heatherly.
On today's episode of Cannabis Currency, we're excited to have Medicine Man Technologies, Inc. They're currently trading on the OTCQX under the ticker symbol MDCL. Medicine Man Technologies, Inc. is an experienced first mover and fully integrated operator in the cannabis industry. They've been offering consulting, retail pharma-grade products, and turnkey solutions for cannabis cultivators for over a decade. And today we're excited to have their CEO, Mr. Andrew Williams. Andy, welcome to Cannabis Currency.
Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate you having us.
For those that are unaware, Andy Williams is amongst America's most pioneering thought leaders and entrepreneurs in the legal cannabis space. He brings his years of experience in the world's first regulated market in Colorado, making him a leading expert on the cannabis industry. Mr. Williams, if you could tell our Cannabis Currency listeners briefly about your business background and your business, Medicine Man Technologies, Inc.
Sure. Well, a little bit about, the genesis of the company and how we got there. So I am an industrial engineer. I've been in different manufacturing businesses throughout my life. Also a lifelong entrepreneur and had varying degrees of success prior to this. So I actually ended up back in the workplace quite often, again, working in manufacturing at different levels of those companies. In 2009, when the Ogden Memorandum came out, of course, Colorado in 2000 had passed an amendment to our Constitution that allowed for cannabis cultivation in the home and even people growing cannabis in their home for others who had recommendations from their doctors. And in October of 2009, the Department of Justice published a memorandum called the Ogden Memorandum that said that they would place a low priority on the enforcement of cannabis laws for people following state regulations. And at the time, I viewed that as a green light to start to build a cannabis industry in Colorado. And I went to my brother, also an entrepreneur, who had been growing cannabis in his home for other people under the Colorado constitutional law and had learned how to cultivate cannabis very well. And I said, hey, listen, I'll do the business side, you do the cultivation side, and let's go big with what you're doing. And so that was the start of, at the time, a company called Medicine Man, and still is called Medicine Man. So we've been in business since late 2009. We are a leading cultivator and retailer of cannabis in Colorado. Since that time, we've also started a company called MedFarm. MedFarm is the only licensed research company that also has a cannabis license that is active in the United States. We are what's called a marijuana-infused product company in Colorado as well. So we extract from the plant the cannabinoids that it creates, and we make products out of it to sell in both the recreational and medical markets of the current Colorado regulatory structure. We also have a research arm, like I said, that conducts research on cannabis and is doing some just phenomenal work. Anyway, in 2014, laws were being promulgated and around the country and legislation being passed that would open up cannabis laws in other states. And during our 5 years of business at that time, we had developed some great processes, procedures, and intellectual property to grow cannabis industrially. It had never been done legally before we attempted it. And so, with my industrial engineering background and my brother's knowledge, we had some repeatable processes and intellectual property that we thought would be great as a consulting company. And we partnered up with a gentleman named Brett Roper, and we began Medicine Man Technologies. So it started as a consulting company, And we helped people that had the desire and business acumen and money and sometimes political context they needed in order to try for a license in the state, but they didn't have the know-how, and we provided that know-how. So we helped them secure those licenses. We helped design and build facilities, train employees, and helped get their systems up and running and get their doors open. And we soon became a leader in that space. We've helped well over 100 clients now in 20 states and 7 countries. We've developed expertise in all of those areas of the country and the world in terms of their marijuana regulation, and developed some really great relationships there, helping people out. We've also grown the company to many other lines of service, to include helping people that are in the industry and need help to boost their efficiencies or yields or sales, whatever it might be. And so we help people do better in their existing businesses. And we also have products. So along the way, we acquired a company called 3Alite with Joshua Haupt, who's as really known as the best cultivator of cannabis in the country. So we acquired him because of his ability to produce cannabis like no other, which has been a great acquisition for us in terms of what we can offer our customers and helping us continue to grow. We also purchased a nutrient line that he had created called Success Nutrients. Success Nutrients is by far the best nutrients I've ever used, and I use it in my own facilities, and I know we own the company, but I tell you right now, I wouldn't use it if it wasn't the best, because it would cost me too much money. And so we're expanding distribution of this product line right now, and I think it's going to really catch fire. And then we also have a company we've acquired called Big Tomato, one of the oldest suppliers of cannabis equipment and supplies to cultivators in the industry. And so now we supply cultivators everything they need to grow the plants, from scissors and nets to soils and nutrients and everything in between. And so our portfolio has grown quite a lot. And last year we did about $9.4 million in revenue with a $2.2 million of EBITDA. And so it's become quite a good company, and it's been performing well in the public markets.
Well, you have been a leader in all facets of the growing cannabis industry. I know you recently helped with the writing and passage of Colorado's HB 19. Let's talk about acquisitions. Recently, I know back in June, you guys announced 2 strategic cannabis acquisitions, one for Los Sueños and the other Purple Bees. If you could give us a little more details on these 2 recent acquisitions.
Absolutely, Marcus. You did mention House Bill 191090. We have been working on getting that bill passed for more than 3 years, and excited that it's been signed. And what that allows, so up until now, and sorry, I'm deviating from your question a little, but this background is important.
No, that's fine.
Up until now, Colorado being the first regulated market in the country, the legislators passed very strict rules on ownership and investment into our industry. And that was because they wanted, one, to give Coloradans the opportunity to take advantage of this new industry, and 2, because they wanted a throat to choke that was close to them. And they wanted to keep tight reins on this industry. So they didn't allow for out-of-state ownership, and they didn't allow for public company ownership of cannabis companies. And while I think that was needed at the time, those laws became antiquated as states around the country started passing their own legislation, and based on what they saw in Colorado, didn't feel the need to put those same restrictions on. And over the last couple of years, you've seen a lot of money come into the cannabis industry, for a lot from Canada, and now the United States investment is opening up. But that investment had flown around Colorado, not to it, because of those restrictions. Investors wanted equity. Investors wanted less restriction. And so with the passage of this law, it allows for that investment, and it allows for public company ownership of cannabis companies. So what we're doing right now, we've been planning for 5 years, which is to acquire cannabis companies to roll up the best and the brightest in Colorado into Medicine Man Technologies itself. That's important because Colorado is really the shining star of mature operations, the best operators, the most proven products and brands. And this is a very new market for people outside of Colorado to be able to take part in. And so Medicine Man Technologies, of course, in January announced the binding term sheets with Medicine Man Denver, the cultivation and retail company that I founded. Also MedFarm, the research and marijuana-infused product company that I talked about a little while ago. And then just a couple months ago, we announced the acquisition of Los Dueños. Los Dueños is the largest producer of cannabis in North America. They will produce somewhere around 75,000 pounds of marijuana this year, and it's cultivated mostly outdoors and some in greenhouses. We do have plans to expand that capability as well. And then we've also announced the binding term sheet for Purple Bees. Purple Bees is, also has a couple of retail locations and has their own products. So they're a marijuana-infused product company. But really their forte is their ability to extract tremendous amounts of biomass. So they have large capability in terms of extraction, and they do a lot of white labeling in Colorado for other marijuana-infused product companies. And so if you kind of look at the strategy that we're laying out in terms of what we're rolling up, you see that we're acquiring the supply that we're going to need in order for our expansion. With the supply that we're going to have from Bob DeGabriel and Los Dueños, we will be able to have our own supply for a much expanded role in our marijuana-infused product companies, as well as a much larger retail reach. With Purple Bees, we've acquired the ability to process all of the cannabis and then some that Los Dueños can produce, and that's very important. You can have all the marijuana in the world, but if you can't do anything with it, you're a little stuck. So what you've seen so far is acquiring the supply that we need, the ability to make the raw material for marijuana-infused product companies, as well as produce those products. You've seen other layers or other levels of cultivation that we're acquiring with Medicine Man, the indoor side, because as prices go, you have outdoor as what's perceived as the lowest quality or gets the lowest price at the retail market. Then you have greenhouse, which we also have and we'll be expanding out our capability for, which is the second level, and then the highest level you have indoor, and Medicine Man Denver has that. And then, of course, we'll be expanding out not only some others to fill different market segments in the marijuana-infused product side, so, targeting different market segments of the industry and targeting companies that are leading in that area to acquire, and then also targeting a large distribution, so a large retail presence throughout the state. So being very strategic in where we're acquiring these retail centers, but have a very large presence of retail around the state. And so that's a strategy that we're rolling out right now in Colorado. And we're Colorado focused this year, but when these acquisitions are complete, our focus will turn external to Colorado and start looking at having a deep presence in other states.
Sure. Let's talk about that. And let's talk about expansion. Mm-hmm. And if you could talk a little bit about your investment from Dye Capital and how that strengthens your footprint in the industry and how it will help you going forward.
Sure. Of course, I told you we're concentrating in Colorado right now because it's a Herculean effort for what we're doing, rolling up quite a few companies here. We'll be looking at other states that we feel are good markets that we want to penetrate deeply. We don't want to be a quarter inch deep and a mile wide. We want to be deep where we are to have a great presence to help have economies of scale in those markets. We've also made an acquisition in Colombia. So we are now fully licensed in the country of Colombia and able to cultivate, extract, make products, research, sell into the local economy under their medical program, and to export cannabis products or cannabis oil to countries that allow for the import of those products right now. The important part of that is, one, we can make money in the short term in the local market and the limited exports that we could do, but it's building out our capability there so that in the long term, when the world markets start opening up, as legalization keeps happening around the world, we can be in a very strong position to be competitive in the worldwide supply of cannabis and cannabis products because of the low cost of production and ideal climate in order to grow cannabis year-round. Now, in order to accomplish all of these expansive goals, we needed a couple things. One, we needed financial help because this takes a tremendous amount of money, and so we needed to find good long-term investment from a very strong capital partner. And then we also had a big gap operationally. All of these businesses that we're rolling up are great entrepreneurs. They have competed in one of the toughest markets in the United States and do it profitably. but none of us have the experience of multi-company, multi-million dollar integrations and acquisitions. And so that was a big hole in our leadership team. So those are two of the things that we had to solve. And I was very fortunate to meet Justin Dye at Dye Capital and his team. Justin now has a family office and, typically invests in businesses that he thinks there's a lot of growth opportunities. They invest and help them grow and to scale their businesses. And typically he's done that on the private front. But he loved what he saw here. They initially wanted to invest $5 million, and since just a couple months' time, and they've learned more about the business and what we're doing, and see us executing on our vision, they've quadrupled that. So, our total raise for this first round, being led by Dye Capital, is $21 million. But in addition to the capital that they bring and ability to bring additional capital and much larger scale later, they bring the operational experience for acquisitions and integrations. Justin Dye was part of the leadership team that when Albertsons was purchased, he was put in to help that company grow. And in that process, they did $40 billion of acquisitions and divestitures. They integrated all of those acquisitions and grew the company from less than $10 billion to over $60 billion. They went from, I think, 300 stores to 2,600 stores, I think it was. And so the amount of growth that he saw, the acquisitions, the integrations, was tremendous. And so not only did he bring the money, but he brought contacts for people and was able to recruit them with us to come to our leadership team that helped him go through that process. So these are people that have been through this, that have done this, and on a much larger scale than even we're talking about. So we were able to shore up a big hole in making sure that we're going to be successful in this aggressive expansion by bringing that expertise. So I'm very excited to have Dye Capital and now the people that he was able to refer on our team.
Well, exactly. And that's getting me to my last question here, which is in regards to the recent appointments to your team. Todd Williams as Chief Strategic Officer, Colin Lodge as VP of Integration, and Lee Dayton as Chief Administrative Officer. How do you see these appointments moving you guys forward?
Well, that's exactly what I just said. We have all the marijuana experience that a company could want. If you look at what's going to end up being the Medicine Man Technologies leadership team, we will have hundreds of years of regulated market cannabis experience. And I would put us up against anybody else in the industry and probably give them a huge head start and still be able to beat them on experience. What we didn't have is what I said, the integration, the back of the house, building the infrastructure that we need in order to manage this company and run this company efficiently and go through that transition as seamlessly as possible. And so, Todd, as a Chief Strategy Officer, was, Justin's right-hand man as he went through all these acquisitions and integrations. Lee has been an investment banker. He's been part of integrations like this as well. He brings tremendous skill, helping to set all of this back of the house work up. Colin, of course, was very involved in all these integrations and acquisitions at Albertsons as well, and worked directly with Todd there. So this is kind of a dynamic duo that came over. We have Leo Riera on our team, also a former banker. He was in the House of Venezuela's government. He has been, he's just done a tremendous amount of things over time. He's on our board now and also helping us to grow our Colombia operations. We have a gentleman named Narup, who was the CIO of United Airlines, and he's heading up our CTO function right now as a contractor, helping us to build the infrastructure of technology and software that we're going to need in order to run this company. So, all of these additions have filled gaps that would have been very difficult to fill with my Rolodex.
I can appreciate that. Very well said, Andy. Today, folks, you've been listening to Mr. Andy Williams. He is the CEO of Medicine Man Technologies. They're on the OTCQX, trading just over $3 per share, continually growing, very well managed. I think if you listen to Andy speak today, you'll see that they have a plan to move the company forward here in the future, and they have a team in place to really win on all fronts. So, Andy, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming on Cannabis Currency and giving us a spotlight on your company.
Thank you very much, Marcus. I hope to come back sometime.
This audio interview was entirely sponsored and produced by Publicly Traded Podcasts, which is responsible for the content. The opinions and information provided in this audio interview are those of the guests and those of the respective companies that they represent, and do not necessarily reflect those of the team or management of Publicly Traded Podcasts. All listeners of this audio interview are encouraged to do their due diligence and research when planning and executing investment strategies. We strongly recommend seeking the assistance of an investment professional. The guests interviewed may have paid for an extended audio distribution package and are in no way affiliated with Publicly Traded Podcasts or their audio distribution partners.